I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. Hi, welcome back to Parent Like a Psychologist. Today is another book review. If you followed me for a little while, you'll know that I love reading. In fact, I have another podcast that I do for fun, which is just about books. That one's called Between the Lines. So if you are an avid reader like me, head over and check it out. And so that's what I do with a friend who is a psychotherapist and works with adults. So lots of our books have topics like that. Lots of the books we cover are based on topics that have that self-care or learning about ourselves as humans and as parents approach. But this Parent Like a Psychologist podcast is really just about parenting and kids and their development. So I will review any particular books that are like that on this podcast. And for me, it's because reading is one of the ways that I learn the best. It seems to be when I read and take notes or write things down that it sinks in for me. So that's, if you're a fellow reader, then, you know, by all means, read all the books that I'm talking about and recommending, because that's going to be really helpful for you. But in case you're not, listening to this review might be helpful. Otherwise, listening to the audiobook is a good way to do it as well, because some people find it easier to learn through listening rather than through reading. I want to talk today about the 12 Principles for Raising a Child with ADHD by Russell Barkley. And Russell Barkley is a researcher and practitioner in working with children with ADHD who's got decades of experience. He has family members with ADHD as well, although is neurotypical himself. And he's written another book called Taking Charge of ADHD, which is a lot more, it covers things in a lot more detail than the book we're going to talk about today. And that's really great for people who love that in-depth approach and get into it. So that's one I'm reading as well. I'll review that at some point also. But, he's also written books called for if you are in a relationship with somebody with ADHD as well. So I can't remember what it's called, but I'll put that in the show notes. It's about how to, I'm just trying to look it up now because that's going to be easier for you than if I can't remember it. Because if you are listening to it, you don't want to have to look up the show notes, right, to find out about what the book is called. But it's about supporting somebody you love with ADHD, because that is a different kettle of fish. For kids, it's the parent-child relationship is a bit different. You don't have as much guidance when you're talking about a partner with ADHD or somebody else. It could be a sibling or a parent. So it's called When an Adult You Love Has ADHD. That's his one about living with other adults with ADHD. But today I'm talking about this one, 12 Principles for Raising a Child with ADHD. And this one is based on taking charge of ADHD. But I think what he has done in this book is tried to distill down a lot of the in-depth information to just be a simpler version of just the 12 principles that can guide you through this parenting journey. Sometimes his work is criticized for being deficit focused. And I think as you read the book, sometimes you might get that feeling. But there's a little bit of debate about this in the realm of ADHD at the moment. And lots of people are talking about how ADHD is a superpower. But I think there's a couple of times, or there's more nuance to that I think is worth unpacking. So some people say that ADHD is a superpower. I think that's really different when we're talking about adults compared to when we're talking about kids, because adults have a much higher level of self-awareness, self-regulation, and independence than children do. And so it's a really different conversation as to whether you're talking about supporting someone with ADHD or seeing it as a superpower when they are an individual who's grown and mature enough to look after themselves. When you're talking about a child who is still growing and still developing, I think I'm much more aligned with thinking about what support a child needs in order to develop and flourish, than seeing how they do things as a superpower and leaving it go. And I think the thing too is that, so children are still developing, that's one point. But the second point is that children are not independent. They're still learning those things. So what you do to support kids changes that developmental path. So I think it's really important to focus on support as well. So one that links to one of the principles that he talks about, and I'll go over that in a second. But I think it's just worth knowing that I think it's really difficult to say, to focus on either ends of the spectrum there, to say either that ADHD is a superpower or that ADHD is a terrible problem. I don't think either of those are correct, but it's trying to find that balance in between. And some of these things, Russell Barkley does talk about some positives in there, so it's not all doom and gloom. So 12 principles, you can see if you're looking on YouTube, it's not a particularly big book. It's on audiobook as well, so you can listen to it, but sometimes going through it with sticky notes and bookmarks and things like that is really helpful. I'll talk to you about what the principles are one by one, I think, rather than give a summary and then dive into it and give another conclusion. So the first principle he talks about in the book is using the keys to success. So actually, maybe it's helpful to give a bit of an overview at the beginning. So he talks about using the keys to success and remembering that it is a disorder. And those things are kind of about parent mindset. And a disorder is an example too of where it can be a bit of a negative word, but it's hard to find an alternative for that. And then he goes through some more the principles that are about parenting and what you can do to help. And where you can get support from is one of those as well. But so the first principle here is using the keys to success. And I guess that's based on lots of the knowledge and research that he has done. What he says in there is that it's really hard to predict outcomes for kids with ADHD. And that's probably true of all kids as well. It's hard to predict exactly where they're going to end up in the end. But he says there are a few key factors that make it an easier path for kids. And so the first one is to be sure you've had a professional evaluation and support plan in the beginning. So that means that you have met with somebody who can help you understand ADHD, if it fits with your child, and then come up or, collaborate with you or help you know what the best things are that you might need to focus on in terms of support and intervention, whether that's medication or psychology support for you as a parent to learn different ways to do things, or if your individual child has some other difficulties that are co-occurring, like anxiety, working with your child. The second thing he goes through is to identify your child's talents and things that they're good at. And that's really important. All kids have strengths, and so identifying the strengths and what they're good at is a great guide for kids with ADHD, because they're primed to do well in those areas. The third key area is find resources around you that can help develop that talent. So if kids are interested and have skill in doing something, then tap them into a community that's designed to help with that. So, for example, if they're into golf, find a place they can do and learn golf. If it's rugby league, it's rugby league. If it's chess, it's chess. It can be anything, because developing that skill is a great thing for resilience, because it's something that kids can become competent in, and it teaches them that they can do it. That's really great for their self-esteem and self-talk. And the fourth thing is to be a safety net, an unconditional advocate and support system for your child. So that's about thinking about your role as a parent. And, that's not easy, we know, and that's probably what the next 11 principles are about. The second principle is to remember that it's a disorder. And this one is not so much to point out the negative, but because it helps you adjust your expectations. And as a parent, if you understand that your child has a different pattern of processing things and learning and developing, then you have a very different view to if you just see your child never doing what you ask them to do. So having that adjustment in your expectations about how it's not their fault and they're trying their best, they just need different strategies, is really helpful. This leads into the estimate that he's done about executive functioning, and how executive functioning is underdeveloped in ADHD kids. So understanding that and adjusting your expectations will prove very helpful throughout childhood, because lots of the challenges parents report are that, about whether their child listens to them and does what they say. And if they don't, then that's an area for some high conflict. But if you can adjust that and make that less of an issue, you're going to have a much more harmonious home. Next, he talks about being a shepherd, not an engineer, which I think is a great point of view and very similar to what's there in another book that I've recently read. So it's thinking about how, trying to take away that perception of being a parent as all about controlling your child's behavior, to turn them into, the human that you want them to be. And it's more about thinking about how you can guide them through their life, their challenges and skills to learn, without focusing so much on controlling every aspect of it. That's really helpful for families who find that they're in a bit of a daily battle with their child. It talks about then the fourth principle of getting your priorities straight. So you can't focus on everything at once, but what key things do you want to focus on? It talks about mindful parenting, and that's a really important skill for two reasons. And one is that it reduces parent stress levels, but also it can help your kids tune into their own thoughts and feelings a little bit better and develop that skill in them. Principle 6 is promoting your child's self-awareness and accountability. And the book's got some practical strategies for how you can do that, which is really useful. So one example he gives is to do this he describes an activity that's all about kind of checking in asking your child to check in whether they're doing what they're supposed to, whether they're on track and on target. And it's not so much designed to then punish that if it's not happening, but designed to promote that skill for kids to be able to stop and think, am I on track? Am I doing what I should be? Have I finished that chore I was meant to be doing? Oh no, wait, I'm in front of the, TV. That's probably a bad example because once they're in front of the TV, they're not going to think about anything else. But if you get the idea, it's about promoting that skill in your kids. The seventh principle is one that I use a lot. So he talks about touch more, reward more, and talk less. So I fumbled that, sorry. But the principle is touch more, reward more, and talk less. And it's based on the idea of how kids with ADHD are paying attention to, first of all, instructions, but then also tasks as well. Touching more is about getting attention to start with, so breaking through all of the noise, background noise of different input that kids will be paying attention to. So how to break into that. Talking less is because we generally tend to use too much babble when we give our kids instructions, and ADHDers need less information. So that strategy, and then rewarding more as well. So because the reward systems in ADHD brains are a little bit different, using external rewards is much more helpful. The eighth principle is about making time real, and any family whose kid struggles to get out the door in the morning is going to really appreciate that chapter. It's got some really practical ways in how you can try and set up tasks and things at home so that your child develops their skills in being able to manage their time, estimating how long things take, meeting deadlines, or so deadlines can either be long, like assignments, or short, as in getting ready for school. The next principle is about working memory, and because it's not working, I guess, how you can offload that and try and make it visual rather than relying on memory. There's a principle about getting organized, and it's helping you as a parent do that, but also because all of these things you do as a parent then inadvertently teach your kids how to do it as well. And as they develop through childhood, they will become more and more independent in doing that stuff. He talks also about making problem solving concrete and then being proactive, so planning for difficult situations at home and away. I think, in summary, it's a really great guide for parents because it's easy to read and digest, whereas some other books aren't. He gives really practical strategies that you can use, and I would encourage parents to have a go at reading it and then putting in place some of the strategies that you hear, that you read about. Just one at a time is enough, and see how it goes. It's worth a try, right, to make home life easier and more relaxed. I think, so it's really accessible. There's resources at the end as well that go line up with each chapter. But I think as you go through as well, there are some things like diagrams and stuff that can help. So one I'm flicking to here is getting organized and help with the help of the internet. So it's got some strategies and tables and things so that you can print them out or copy them. Just to make things a lot easier at home. One thing, I don't know whether it was in this book or in Taking Charge of ADHD, there's one thing in there that's about time out, and that's probably the only thing I would not recommend using. It feels quite strange going against what Russell Barkley would recommend because he's done decades of research and work, but well, more decades than me. I have done decades, I guess, like 20 years or so, but he's probably done 40. But in my experience, this is why I wouldn't use time out for kids with ADHD. The first thing is that, well, really, this sums it up. This is the most important thing, that kids don't want to go to timeout. And so if you're asking them to go to timeout and they don't, you're stuck. What are you going to do? As they get bigger, you can't physically put them in timeout anymore. And so then you are stuck in this position where, you know, your child hasn't done the right thing. You've told them to go to timeout. What if they say no? Your only option then is either to walk away or to try and escalate what you're doing, which means either to force them by moving them physically or by raising your voice and yelling at them or saying, adding another punishment like, well, if you don't, then you're going to lose this as well. And that is an example of what we call the coercive cycle, which means that a child does the wrong thing, the parent puts in a consequence, child does bigger behavior, parent does bigger consequence, child does bigger behavior again, and parent does bigger consequence again. And it just tends to blow up until the point at which one or more of you storm off and leave. It's really ineffective when you get into that battle. And all it's really reinforcing to the child is if they argue enough and put up enough of a resistance, then you will give up because you won't have a choice to. You'll either, there'll be a point at which you have to just walk away. So I just think there's a lot more problems with it than there are solutions. So I do have, I recommend a lot more for parents to use time in, or give yourself time out. That's another one. So time in is if your child's really emotionally upset, just sit with them and say, like, you look really upset, and you sit with them until they're kind of through that feeling. Or the thing I would recommend is if your child keeps doing the wrong thing, give yourself time out, which is what I do a lot, and say, look, I'm really frustrated at this situation. I just need some time out. I need 5 minutes to calm down or to, chill, whatever. Walk away yourself, do some deep breathing and get yourself in check again, and then come back. There's lots of opportunities then to talk about the behavior later when it's not happening, and get the message across then. But in the moment, I think that timeout is something that's it's just too risky. It's not worth the battle. What I also recommend instead then is doing things like rewards, which is mentioned in the book. If you've got rewards to encourage the behavior that you want to see, that's a lot better than having punishments. So just focus on a really heavy reward system so that most of the time your child's kind of incentivized to do the right thing. And then when things happen, just think about keeping everyone safe and chalk it up to like a missed opportunity, but that you've got lots of other things in place to teach the right behavior anyway. I don't think, you don't have to be perfect. You're going to lose it sometimes, as we all do. That's another time to just say, look, take the time out, and come back and, repair whatever's happened. Sorry for yelling or something, or maybe it's even like, when you yell at me, I just felt really awful. I needed to go and take a break. But I think that's much better than using the timeout. So all in all, I think, I actually don't think timeout's in this book, but it is in the last book, Taking Charge of ADHD. So just worth mentioning that if you're reading both, just steer away from that. Have a listen. I do think it's really worth it, and it distills lots of complex information into some really practical strategies. So definitely a book that I'd recommend. If you read it, let me know, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it and whether you had any questions or parts that you were unsure how fits with your family, or even if you read it all and thought, yeah, that's great, but my family is different because of this, or what do you do when this happens? Please let me know, because I will answer those questions as best I can. And if you're thinking it, surely other families are as well. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's about how to adapt the challenges, adapt your parenting for the situations when the regular stuff doesn't fit with your kids because they're developing differently. So we're all part of the village here. So get in touch and let me know your questions, and I can help you and everybody else who might be listening. So you can get that book anywhere, but I will include a link in the notes as well. So yeah, have a read. Tell me what you think. Thanks for joining me again today. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.